Now, I don't know about you, but it feels like concern over the national debt has just disappeared into the ether. I mean, once upon a time, debt and deficit were huge issues. I mean, they were at the heart of what people looked for in the federal budget. But I don't feel like people seem to care anymore. They just don't seem to care. You know, we just seem to be happy to let the government run up the credit card. There's the small issue, of course, that we still have to pay it back at some point. And the only way to get that money is taxes from you. I mean, yesterday, the national debt passed $1 trillion. And it happened with barely a whimper. I just don't get it.
You are about to discover why Australia's national debt just smashed past $1 trillion and why almost nobody in Canberra seems to care anymore. Before we get into it, I have a favour to ask. If you are not subscribed to the channel yet, please take a second to do that now and tap that notification bell while you're at it. You done? Thank you so very much. Now, let us continue.
EQ Economics Managing Director Warren Hogan is with me now. Warren, am I the only one who thinks this has kind of fallen off the radar? Like, if it was 10 years ago, I think it all went haywire when Tony Abbott and Joe Hockey, in their first budget, tried to rein things in a bit, and they tried to institute an austerity budget, and people went mad. And I don't think any government has been willing to really talk about debt and deficit properly since then, and we now find ourselves in a position where it's fallen off the national interest and we've got $1 trillion of debt.
Yeah, good evening, Caleb. Look, I think that's not a bad sort of timeline. Certainly in the 20 years prior, after the recession we had to have, you know, Australian governments, federal and state, were held to the fire on fiscal responsibility and keeping the deficits as low as possible and debt under control. And I think you may be onto something there. I mean, that was the last sort of austerity type budget. It sort of set the coalition up. The coalition did work towards getting the budget back into balance gradually over the following 6 years. But really, it's COVID and since then where it doesn't seem to be the same electoral issue and enforced at the ballot box the way it once was. And it's dangerous because there's a lot of people in our community going around saying, well, look, we've got a lot lower debt than places like Europe and the United States and, of course, Japan. So, you know, we've got a lot of headroom here. So why don't we use it for good causes? It's too simplistic. The bottom line is in Australia is that we had disciplined government finances for 30 years and we racked up the world's largest household sector debt. So we do have still a lot of debt in this country, even though it's not all sitting with the government. And if the government decides to change tack and run up debt the way it is, expect something to happen with the household debt, which I think we're starting to see the initial signs of.
Well, indeed. And the people they then eventually have to get the money from to pay the interest, and if they're going to pay the loans back, is us. So the idea that it's just sort of government money is not true. It is our money, effectively our debt, that they keep running up, and it will be my generation and my kids and whatever who will end up having to bear the brunt of all of this.
Yeah, well, the fact that you have to say it, that we have to talk about it like this is a real concern. I mean, it is our money. It's the taxpayers' money. And look, there is this debt that will be future taxation if it ever is paid down. But we're already seeing a massive tax burden being put onto this economy right now, plus the racking up of the debt. So, look, this is a problem here, but it's a real problem overseas. And just this week, we saw the US Treasury intervene in the government bond market for the first time since COVID to try and take some heat out of rising long-term interest rates. And the basic arithmetic is when your funding cost, either these long-term interest rates on government debt, go above your nominal growth in the economy, which is essentially growth plus inflation, then you've got yourself a real sustainability problem, which, of course, is where the world is flirting with. We've got Japan with unimaginable debt compared to what we have at 235% of GDP, and they've got real troubles with rising interest rates. So, look, we would be well advised to take a leaf out of our own book of the last 3 decades and start showing a bit of restraint. And, of course, our inflation problem right now is partly, in a big way, caused by governments spending too much each year, so their rate of growth of spending being too high.
Indeed, and I think people, whether they like it or not, kind of have to get it through their heads that we've got to pull in the belt sooner or later, because if we don't do it now, we're going to end up in a worse position down the road. Warren Hogan, good to see you as always.
Right, picture this. A little over a decade ago, when the government of the day tried to trim the budget, the entire country lost its mind. Protests, headlines, careers ended. Fast forward to today, and we have blown past $1 trillion in national debt, and the reaction from most of the country is a shrug. That is not progress. That is amnesia. So how did we get here? For roughly 30 years, from the early 90s right through to the pandemic, Australian governments, state and federal, actually behaved like adults. Deficits were treated as embarrassing. Debt was something you paid down, not something you bragged about avoiding. Then along came a certain global health crisis, and every rule about restraint got thrown out the window practically overnight. Now here is where it gets genuinely interesting, and where economist Warren Hogan drops the mic. He says the comfortable little story we tell ourselves that Australia is somehow safer than America, safer than Europe, safer than Japan, is dangerously simplistic. Because while our government debt looks modest on paper, our household debt is sitting at record highs.
Now, I don't know about you,
that
but
is the
it
sneaky
feels
part.
like
It's not
concern
just
over
what
the
the
national
government
debt has
owes,
just
it's what
disappeared
you
into
owe
the ether.
sitting quietly on top
once
of it.
upon a time, debt and
And
deficit
that brings us to
huge
the
issues.
real heart
they were
of the
at the
matter.
heart
This is
of
not
what
really
people
an
look for in
accounting
the federal
exercise.
budget, but I
This
don't
is a
feel
fairness
like
exercise.
people seem to care
Every
anymore.
dollar
They just
borrowed
don't seem to
today
care.
is a dollar
We
some
just seem to
young
be happy to
Australian,
let the
maybe your own
government run up the
child,
credit
will be
card.
paying off
There's the
tomorrow
small issue,
through
of course,
higher
that we still
taxes or
have to
fewer
pay back
services.
at some point.
Debt
And
does
the
not
only
vanish.
way to get
It
that
just
money is
changes
taxes
address.
from you.
And right now,
And
it's moving
yesterday,
toward the next
the national
generation's
debt
letterbox.
passed $1 trillion.
Here's the bit that should
And it
genuinely
happened
worry
with
you.
barely a
Look at
whimper.
what's happening
I just don't get
overseas.
it.
The
Thank you,
United
Economics
States has
Managing
had to
Director
step
Warren
in and
Hogan
prop up
is
its
with me
own
now.
bond market.
Warren,
An
am I the
emergency
only one who
measure that
thinks this has
basically
kind of
screams
fallen
the
off the radar?
finances are wobbling.
If it was 10
Japan
years
has
ago, I
been
think it
wrestling
all
with a debt
went
crisis for
haywire
decades,
when,
currently sitting around
Tony Abbott and
235% of its
in their
entire
first budget
economic output.
tried to rein
These are not
things in a
distant
bit.
curiosities
They tried
happening to
to
someone
institute
else.
an austerity
Think of
budget,
it like
and people
watching your
went mad.
neighbour's house catch
And I
fire
don't think
while
any
you're still
government
cooking
has
on the
been
same
willing
faulty
to really
stove.
talk
The
about
warning is
debt
right
deficit
there next
properly
door.
since then.
And Hogan
we
makes
now find
another
ourselves in a
sharp
position
point
where
that
it's
cuts
fallen
through
off
the noise.
the
Government
national interest, and
spending
we've got $1 trillion
itself
in
has
debt.
been a major driver of the inflation
good
we've all
evening,
been
Caleb.
feeling
Look,
at the
I think
checkout.
that's not a
This was
bad
never
sort of
only about
timeline.
global supply chains or
Certainly
interest rates.
in the
Our
20
own
years
spending
prior,
habits are part
after
of the
the
story.
recession we had to
So what's the
have,
fix? Nothing radical,
Australian
honestly.
governments,
Just a
federal
return
and
to that
state
30-year
were
run
held
of
to the
discipline
fire
we
on
somehow
fiscal
misplaced.
responsibility
Transparent
and keeping
budgeting,
the
sustainable growth,
deficits
and a
as low as
genuine
possible
respect for the fact that
and
this
debt
money
under
belongs
control.
to
And
taxpayers,
I think you may be
not to
onto something there.
Canberra's
that was the last
imagination.
sort of
Get
austerity
that
type
right,
budget.
and Australia
sort of set the
avoids
coalition
becoming
up.
the
The
next
coalition did
cautionary
work
tale.
towards getting the
Get it
budget
wrong,
back into
and we
balance
simply
gradually
become
over
the
following
overseas
6 years.
headline everyone
But really,
else
it's
points at
COVID,
next.
and since
I
then,
appreciate you for taking
it doesn't
time to
seem
watch
to be
this.
the same
Stay
electoral
safe,
issue
and let us make this
enforced
nation a
at the
better
ballot box
place.
the way it once
Leave your
was.
thoughts and
And
opinions
it's
in the
dangerous
comments below.
because